Kennedy here. You are listening to the Trips and Global on Wheels podcast hour, the place to be to learn about the latest and greatest life stories from people who are doing incredible disability advocacy work. Dana Bolles, welcome to the Trips and Global on Wheels podcast hour.
Thank you.
Dana Bolles began her 24-year career with NASA in Florida at the world's only spaceport, the Kennedy Space Center. The first 13 years of her career were spent in regulatory compliance, from payload safety to environmental protection, and she worked at 3 different NASA centers: Kennedy Space Center, Goddard Space Flight Center, and Ames Research Center. Dana's diverse work experience has given her an appreciation not only for the programs and project side of NASA, but also for the mission support functions. Her current role has her working in science communication for exploring life beyond Earth. She is responsible for web sources to help others learn about the search, and also developing a roadmap for NASA to use in preparation for any potential future announcements. In addition to her official duties, Dana volunteers for employee resource groups, ERGs, for women, people with disabilities, and LGBT communities. She is a firm believer of the value of diversity and is committed to raising awareness, especially of the unique experiences and challenges people with disabilities face in their daily lives. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yes, of course. I understand that, and we've met once in person, and you were born with no arms and legs, right? So
Correct.
How did you find the path to pursuing engineering work with NASA? Who was your role model in pursuing this path? Because as you know, you don't see very many people who look like you working in NASA.
Right. I think the main driver for me wanting to pursue a career in engineering is that because of my disability, I rely a lot on technology to be independent. And so I have my artificial arms, my electric wheelchair, and hand controls for the van. So as I was growing up, I got my arms when I was 3. I got my chair. Well, I've always had my chair. Actually, I got my arms at 2, my chair at 3, and hand controls at 16. So growing up, I realized this dependency on technology. And one thing that always bothered me growing up is, because of my very visible disability, people tend to patronize me, right? They just base it on my looks. Oh, poor thing, you can't do anything for yourself, type of thing. So I knew growing up, I wanted to get a job that I could support myself and that I could afford the stuff that I need. Engineering was a great field, I thought, because I could support myself, get the stuff I need, and also if there was something I needed that I didn't have, or maybe something that wasn't quite right, I thought being a mechanical engineer could help me to make it better, to make it fit me better.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Can you share with us, just going a little bit deeper into what your disability is and how that's impacted your life?
So I was born with no legs above the knees. So I have some leg, but not a whole lot. And I was born with missing both arms about 1 inch or 2 below my elbows. So luckily I do have my elbows. I don't know the name of it. We don't know why it happened, but my arm, I have artificial arms, they're hooks. And I used to, when I was 2, I was fitted with my first set. And I tried to reject them as a baby, and I wasn't allowed to, right? My mom made me wear them and all that. Now that I'm older, I'm 50 last year, I turned 50. I realized that I need them. I really need them. But the cool thing about, I guess the cool thing about my disability, being in a wheelchair, is that I could leave my arms on the back of my chair, and I could put them on when I need them. And up until my mid 30s, I didn't realize that. So up until my mid 30s, whenever I was in public, I wore them all the time. And I mean, it could, and they're helpful for reaching stuff, but I'm a lot more comfortable without. So my disability, there's no official name that I know of.
Thanks for sharing that.
Mm.
So was it your childhood career goal to do work with NASA and become, you were saying you want to become an astronaut, right?
I did when I was really young. I was wanting to be an astronaut because I thought what a cool job and to be in space. As I got older, I focused a little more on engineering, mechanical engineering, and I thought that would be helpful. And but the fact that I work for NASA is great. NASA's been a great agency to work with.
What do your parents do, or siblings, if you have any? How did they shape your career trajectory?
So my mom, my mom and my dad, my family in general, they're very supportive of me and whatever I want to do. My mom was a very stubborn woman. She was very, but she taught me to fight for the services that I'm entitled to. And so I grew up watching her always push for that and go after it. And she encouraged me, do whatever you want to do. When I was in high school, so it's kind of interesting. Growing up, I started out going to school for kids with disabilities when I was 3. At 5 years old, that was kind of the beginning of the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. So although it was passed, the schools really weren't familiar yet with how to implement. So at 5, I was very lucky that one of the teachers went to from that I had. She went to the other part of Newford, the quote normal side, and she asked the teacher. She said, "I have a student who would be good in your class. Would you take her?" And that teacher said, I'll have her in my class on 3 conditions. Number 1, she has to get here on time. I don't want her, getting here late. She goes, secondly, she needs to be up to the same level as all the other students. And thirdly, I need to be able to discipline her. So basically, she's like, yeah, I'll take her as long as I can treat her like everybody else, which is perfect, right? And so at 5, I was mainstream. And so from 5 years old till about, I would say my early to mid 20s, I had a lot of internalized oppression with my disability. And so growing up, I didn't want to be associated with all those weird people. I'm ashamed to say it, but I just had that in me. And I'm really happy that in my early to mid 20s, I met people, disabled people who are very amazing. And I'm glad I finally got to that point where I could accept it, because it was hard not having that pride and not having friends who had disabilities and all that. And now it's an amazing community, and I couldn't be more proud to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. I think you answered an even more important question, which is how you came to accept and embrace your disability.
Right.
And so you met people who had disabilities, and you entered the community and discovered that, despite the fact that we look different than quote unquote normal people, inside we have a lot of similarities. And so how did I do understand the internal battle with, I don't want to associate with those weird people. I think every person with a physical disability, at least, so not meaning not an invisible one, has that feeling, and has gone through that phase at some point or another, and come to accept that part of their identity. What would you say to people who are still going through that process, who are you at that phase, struggling to grapple with, your physical disabilities, how you look on the outside, and how that shapes how other people react to you?
I think the thing, the thing that I'm most proud of is that here we are, we have our challenges, right, due to our disability every day, just to get through very basic daily living activities. And we do it, and then we still go out and we accomplish and we do stuff. And to me, if I could just communicate that to the people who don't really see that, I think that that would help switch it for them. They're, you know what I mean? And yeah, it's when I was growing up, I really didn't know many people, and I had one really good friend of mine, Richard DeVilder. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was an amazing man, and we grew up together. Our mothers were friends. They were known as taking in the disabled kids, right? And so they became friends early on. Richard and I were 5 days apart. Our birthdays were 5 days apart. We grew up from day one together, right? His disability was very similar to mine, but he had no arms at all and no legs at all. So he was my only disabled friend. And somehow it was okay that I had one disabled friend, but he was very cool. We grew up together. He was almost like a brother to me. And but Richard, on his life, from day one, he was on the path of, oh yeah, he embraced it. And he was very active in the disabled community. He did great things. And he worked for the governor of California, and he worked for the Obama administration. And, he was an amazing individual. And whereas I kind of went the opposite route and I was kind of away from it, and then I got to the point where I could accept it. So I think if people are struggling with the idea, I think they just need to open their eyes and see all the wonderful people in the community who do great things, like the people who you highlight on your show. That's one good way, right? For them to see those interviews and hear from those people. So they just need to be exposed.
Yeah, exactly. As you get to know more people with
Right.
various different kinds of physical disabilities, um, in the outer layer becomes less important because you get to know the inner layer and
Right.
the different types of personalities. So would you say your lack of exposure to people with disabilities was because of isolation from family and friends, or was it because there really wasn't that many people with disabilities in your community?
Like I said, I was mainstreamed at 5 years old. And so growing up and going through school, I didn't have other kids really that I knew who were disabled. I was the only. So when I was at Newford, I was there from K through 7th grade. We didn't have middle school at that time when I was going through school. So K through 7th, I went to Newford. And because it was attached to the Sander unit, I can go and take my classes, and I can go to the Sander unit and get the help I needed. Because at that time, when I was 7 years old, I used to wear artificial legs. And the thing with the legs is, although I wanted them a lot when I was younger, because I made me look more, quote, normal, right? I looked more like everybody else. I couldn't, when I used the bathroom, I could take them off, but I needed help putting them back on. So all through elementary school, I used the Sander unit to get the help I needed. And then I went to high school, and here I was, the only person in a wheelchair. They did have a bathroom that was accessible, but they kept it locked most of the time. So I would have to go get it unlocked. But despite that, now I'm at a high school where I'm the only person in a wheelchair, and I need help with my legs still, right? And the first day it was horrible. I didn't realize, it didn't hit me that I wouldn't have that help. And so I went like 3 hours without using the restroom when I had to go. And it was awful. And I finally went to the one person who I'd met earlier, only because her son went to high school with my brother. And she helped me, right? And I went home and I told my mom what happened. And she chewed me out. She said, you didn't fight to go to that school to get special treatment. So then for the next 5 years, 8th grade to senior year, I dehydrated myself every day. So I would drink only from like 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. and that was it. And then no more. 5 years of doing that. And that is totally, I just want to tell that story because it's not right that happened. Nobody should ever do that to quote fit in, right? but that was what I felt like I had to do to fit in. And um, it was just, I did stuff like that, and I didn't have other friends with disabilities, and I didn't have the exposure to people like in media, right? You don't see people in media really, at least, especially when I was younger. Now you do, kind of. But for all those reasons, and for me doing everything I could to fit in, also I took marching band to fulfill my PE credit, because that was a legit way to fulfill PE credit. So I did that. So that's just how I ran my life until I started getting exposed to really amazing people.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something. It's terrible that you had to go through that experience, and many wheelchair users, you being a wheelchair user as well, know that it's sometimes hard to find bathrooms that are wheelchair accessible. And so because of that, we have to adjust the liquids we intake, and just have to be aware of these things, and sometimes have to be dehydrated in order to
Yes,
prevent
yes.
accidents and things like that.
Going to New York, I was Greenwich Village, ate at a restaurant. Of course, the restaurant didn't have an accessible bathroom. I had to go to 5 different restaurants before I found one that had an accessible bathroom. And when I looked, the guy, the way the layout of the restaurant is, it wasn't easy for me to get to that bathroom. And in fact, he didn't want to let me, because I looked, I said, "Do you have an accessible bathroom?" He goes, "Yeah, but you can't fit through here." And I go, "Yes, I can." And he let me, reluctantly, he let me use the bathroom. I go, "Look, I've been to 4 other restaurants. I really have to go." And he let me, but he didn't want to.
Mm.
And I think that's one thing I think we need to kind of, I don't know how to do it, but it would be really nice if there was a law that said, if you have an accessible bathroom, you need to let somebody in a wheelchair use it, even if they're not a customer, because the bathrooms are not all accessible. And it's ridiculous that we have to struggle so much. It's a basic human need that everybody has.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It is so basic, and 30 years later after the ADA, and it's still an issue. That's just ridiculous. What do you think when people look at you? What are some myths that they believe about you that makes it hard to make a first impression?
Well, I think I kind of touched upon it earlier, is that because my disability is very visible, the biggest myth, I guess, is that I can't think for myself, right? Or I need help with the simplest things. Um, People need to realize, when you have a disability, don't just assume that you know what that person can and can't do. Let them tell you, if they can or can't. And it's really frustrating, especially when I travel. Say I'm traveling and I have somebody with me. What I really hate is when the service providers, like the airlines or whoever, they want to interact with the person I'm with, talking about me. Does she blah blah blah? That's really annoying. And so when I started traveling a lot, I would tell, like, if I traveled with somebody, I would just say, "Okay, I don't know you until we get to the front gate." I tell the person I'm with, because I force everybody else to interact with me, because if they know that you're traveling with somebody, they're gonna interact with that person. So then they ask me, "Are you traveling with anybody?" I said, "No." So then they have to deal with me. And yeah, so it's a constant education. You're educating people constantly about, stop stereotyping what I can and can't do. Just
Yeah, that's an interesting trick. So I know you also worked as a disability integration advisor briefly for FEMA, right?
Yes.
How did you advance disability rights issues in this role?
So FEMA, I'm really lucky, because working for NASA, one of the things I love about NASA is not only the work I do, which is a very, that's the basic thing. I love that. But it's also working for an agency that has given me so many opportunities. So when FEMA, that year, 2017, when we had 3 hurricanes and the California fires, kind of closely in line, right, right after the other, FEMA really couldn't handle it all, right? They needed help. So they reached out to the federal government. Hey, can people volunteer to help us? And that's a really great thing. And I'll tell you, up until that point, I never ever thought I could be helpful in a disaster recovery effort. I assumed FEMA, what they do is they just go out in the boats and pick people off their rooftops during floodings or whatever, right? That's what I thought. And so when the call came out at NASA, and the center director made a really compelling case, and he said, if anybody is interested, I highly encourage you to volunteer. He said, as civil servants, you know, we're here to help the American people, and this is a great way you could do it. And it just gave me this sense of, wow, that's really, I want to do that. And what he said in the message was, the greatest need they have is for people to staff the call centers. So then I realized, I'm like, oh, so maybe I can be helpful. So that's when I volunteered. And I was sent to Anniston, and we did the training for a week. During that time, I was trying to figure out where I was going to go. And at one of the training videos they talked about the fact that people with disabilities still, it's challenging to figure out how to help them. So then I went to one of the FEMA people and I said, hey, in the video yesterday, I heard this. Is there something I could do to help? Because although I'm not formally trained in all the rules and regulations and laws and all that, I said, because of my experience, I think I could be helpful. So they assigned me to the Hurricane Irma recovery efforts in Orlando. And I was assigned to the housing department. And the whole focus of the housing department is providing housing to the people who lost their homes. Okay, so it's temporary housing until they can get more permanent housing. So my job, and my colleague who was working with me, Stephanie Fell, our whole focus was on making sure that the families of people with disabilities were not left behind. And I tell you what, the government's really good about saying the right thing always. So in these meetings, I would hear, oh, AFN families are our highest priority, right? So they call the families with disabled family members, they call them AFN, accessible function, something, necessity, alternate, I don't know, but basically AFNs, that was what they called the family. So they would start a lot of the meetings saying AFNs are our highest priority. But when we were seeing how things were getting done, and everything was focused on getting the housing as quick as possible, fast, right? We have to do it fast. They were not taking care of the AFN families as quickly as they should. And I think a really frustrating part was there was one person in particular who like turned the whole group against us. And so in the beginning, we were getting cooperation, we were getting information. And by the end of my time there, nobody would talk to us. It was really frustrating. Stephanie and I was so happy that we were at least colleagues and we had each other's backs. But, you know, I'm glad because FEMA had us there to help. They just need to pay more attention to what we're saying and to make sure that the processes include our input, which they're not good at that at all, at least not when I was there. And I tried to provide feedback, and then I was told, oh, thanks for your feedback. We're going to make sure the DIA group knows, but they're not the ones who I wrote it for, right? It wasn't the disability group who I wrote it for. It was for the rest of FEMA. So who knows if that ever got looked at all. But I think it was a great feeling to be able to focus on the families and trying to make sure they got taken care of. And I think we did help in some instances. But as any bureaucracy, we have to make sure that we actually do what we say we're going to do, not just say we're going to do it. It's one thing to have the policies and practices in place, but you actually have to make sure you do it, you know, and that's what we're there for. So.
Yeah, that is the frustrating part with politics, right? It's that politics and sometimes official statements as that they sound really good, but as you saw in actual practice, sometimes it's not necessarily implemented in that way.
Right.
So I know that you also, you volunteered your time at the Employee Resource Group, ERG, which you mentioned in your bio. Can you tell us what that is and how you advance disability issues there?
So at NASA we have different ERGs for whatever marginalized group, right? So there's one for women, there's one for Hispanics and Asian and LGBT. And so I started at Ames in, I think, August 99. And in 2005, I was approached by at that time it was called the EO office, but now it's the Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity. The office approached me and said, "Hey Dana, we really need a disability ERG. Will you lead it for us until it gets on its feet?" So I said, okay. So we had about a handful of people, maybe 12 people in the group. And so this is a volunteer position, right? Because we have our normal jobs, what we're hired to do, and then we have these other groups that we're trying to help the center. We're trying to help the employees. So the employees who want to use the group, we're trying to be there as a support for them, so that if they're having any, so I'm talking about my group in particular, the disability one, and the other ones might run a little differently. But for the disability one, our main purpose was for the employees. And if they were having any disability related challenges, we would try and help get those resolved. The nice thing about having this group is it gives us a process to report stuff if things don't get taken care of, right? So we have these meetings where all the senior managers are involved. And this is where we could bring up stuff if we're having a hard time getting it implemented or getting it addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. It's some great work. And then in terms of, this is the last question on the disability advocacy, and then we'll move on to the bread and butter of what you actually do. What do you think are the biggest challenges you foresee facing people with disabilities in the future, and how can we start overcoming them today?
I think the biggest challenge is just people, like general society, not, I don't know, it's not really not taking this seriously, but because of their stereotypes about disability, about our abilities and what we can and can't do, they're gonna not give us opportunities, right? They're not gonna take us seriously, give us opportunities. And so the biggest challenge as a person with a disability is communicating the fact that yes, we do know what we're doing. Yes, we can. There's a lot of myths surrounding hiring people with disabilities in the work field, right? All these things about, oh, they miss work a lot, they do this a lot, they're that a lot. And there's been studies done to show, yes, some people in our community do that, but they don't do it any more than the non-disabled community. That's the thing. And also I would go further, and I would say hiring a person with a disability, actually there are certain assets that we bring to the table because of our disabilities. Number one, because we don't do things exactly the same as everybody else, we tend to think outside the box constantly, right? So we're already in that mindset of how can we do things the best way to do it, not necessarily how it's always been done, but what's the best way to do it. And it's not always going to be how we've always done it, right? The second one is a lot of us tend to be really good planners. We're really good planners because if we don't plan out stuff, we end up getting screwed later on down the road. And so, like me in particular, just as a simple example, I was going on a holiday trip, and I was going to stop at 3 different places during the holiday, right? And so I needed stuff packed in my van a certain way, because the first night I need access to this, the second night I need access to that. So it had to be packed very specifically. Whereas other people would just throw everything in the car. We can't do that. We need to plan it out. So I don't know if that's not a really perfect example, but we do plan. And for project management, planning is one of the key things that they always try and drill in drill into people's head is to plan, plan, plan. So I think the biggest challenge is we just need to be vocal about, we need to speak up when things are being done, when they're not being done, and also if we're in a workplace and somebody else is being mistreated, we all should speak up. And this is for not just disability, but for any marginalized group that's being discriminated against. If other people who see it happening said something, it would not happen as often as it does. That's for sure. And I think that's a big problem is we all kind of, I think we're all in life, we're all here to help each other through life. And so when we see injustices being done, we need to help fix that. Even if you don't see it as affecting you, because any injustice is an injustice for all of us. So we have to address it.
Yeah, no, I think attitudinal barriers are a problem, and you know there are a lot of myths surrounding the disability community that needs to be overcome, and the challenges of that. Both, I think it's both progress that needs to be made from the disability community and the able-bodied community in terms of people with disabilities being more active and voicing their opinions and really just getting their thoughts out there. And then the able-bodied community really stretching themselves and keeping an open mind and hiring people with disabilities in all the different facets of society. Yeah. So as I alluded to earlier, now we're going to move on to your work at NASA, which you've been working at for decades. So I know your current role has you working in science communication for exploring life beyond Earth. Could you elaborate on what kind of work you're currently doing? I mean, that sounds super impressive, but what does that entail in terms of day-to-day work?
Yeah, so this is actually my first experience working in science communications because I have an engineering degree and I started out in that way back when at Kennedy. And so this opportunity came up to work at NASA headquarters. So actually NASA headquarters is my fourth center I've worked at. So now I have 4 centers under my belt. It's been a really amazing experience for me because it's my first time I've been able to work in the Search for Life, which is part of a larger astrobiology, which is really amazing. I'm always fascinated about the thought about the possibility of life in the universe outside of the world and this world, and I do believe there is. But I just up until now I had no idea really how much NASA has really done in that search. And what I've learned over this year is it's done a lot. It's done a lot, and it's an amazing field. Astrobiology itself is just growing. It's growing a lot every day. And when I went to my first AbSciCon Astrobiology Science Conference, which was held last June, I was amazed at, number one, the diversity of the group. It was just like people from all cultures and ages and you know, like the LGBT community. It's just really, it was nice to see that in a science community. It's very open and accepting, and it's an exciting field, looking for life. And it's searching for life beyond Earth it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, but I think over the years we've done a lot, and we've learned, especially like with Mars, there are so many spacecraft and rovers there. We're learning a lot every day, and I'm not sure when an announcement will be made, but probably not too far off in the future, you know. And it's been exciting meeting the people, the experts in the field, and creating the roadmap that we have for how NASA should handle an announcement. That was a real exciting activity for me to meet the experts and to hear them talking about the challenges and their experiences and how we could do it better.
So you think there is life in that?
My personal belief, not NASA, my personal belief is there is life out there because, I mean, think about it. The universe is so vast, right? I mean, just our galaxy is huge, and then everything else, all the other galaxies out there, all the other stars and planets, and so to me, I just can't believe we're the only ones in the whole universe. I feel like it's a little bit arrogant to think that we would be when there's so much space out there. So,
So when can we move into Mars?
um, I think we're far off from living in Mars, my personal opinion. I'm not speaking as NASA, okay? It's just from my personal opinion. So right now, what we're doing is NASA's looking at going to the moon first. We're going to go back to the moon and stay. So we're going to sustain being there, and then we're going to use the moon as a stepping stone to get to Mars. There's a lot of challenges right now, a lot of really great challenges to going to Mars and living there. And the good thing is NASA has done a great job looking at all of what's needed, and they, like for the human research program, I have a number of years working for the human research program, and their whole focus is on how do you minimize the risk to space exploration. So a lot of that is looking at, the effects of space radiation on the body, the effects of distorted sleep patterns, and how do you build a good team, that's going to go to Mars and not want to kill each other once they get up there. So there's a lot of things that you have to think of when you explore space, and it's not an easy thing, but I think NASA has a good handle on what sorts of things to consider in order to minimize that risk as much as possible.
Yeah. No, I'm sure there is a lot involved. So for people who see you and working for NASA, for decades doing this incredible work, and they think you're just this one-off special person, what do you say to that? Especially, I'm sure there are many other individuals with disabilities who dream of working for NASA and pursuing their own goals of serving their country, serving their, making their own personal visions, dreams come true.
I would say if you have that vision, if you have that desire to do it, to try for it, no matter what. I am not the only disabled person at NASA who has had great accomplishments. There's many people. There's a woman down at Armstrong Flight Research Center, and she's a deaf individual, and she's in a very mission critical role. And so there's lots of us all over the agency, and in addition, there's a lot of people with disabilities doing great things in whatever job, not just government. And my main message is whatever you want to do, whether it's work for the government or not, just do it, and don't let what other people think or say about you that's a negative tone, don't let that affect you at all. You just have to learn to not listen to that, because there's going to be a lot of it. There's going to be a lot of chatter in the background saying, oh, they can't do that, or oh, they're getting that job only because of that. In the end, however you get your job, as long as you have to produce when you get a job, you have to be productive, and you have to do things and prove people wrong, that you're worth every other person at that place, and even probably even more, because you'll try harder.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's very well said. Thank you so much, Dana, for participating. You're doing incredible work, not only, with disability advocacy through your speaking engagements, but also working for NASA and the incredible work that you do exploring life beyond Earth. And I can't wait to get that ticket to Mars. Thanks to your progress. I know I will get that first ticket to Mars, right?
Oh, right, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to be the first one to go to Mars. I think that the first ones, they're at a little bit of a greater risk than the rest of them after. But yeah, it's like buying the first piece of the new technology that comes out. I like to wait a model or two later to see all the bugs are taken out.
Thank you.
Did you like this video? If so, share with your friends and be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want even more resources, Be sure to sign up for our email updates on our website, traipsingglobal.com. Keep learning new perspectives, keep being inclusive, because it will make the world a better place for you and for everyone else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on another episode of the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour.